Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Happy International Women's Day to our panelists, my fellow colleagues, and our clients celebrating with us here today. My name is Clarissa Ventimiglia. I am the Global Delivery Platform Manager for Investech Operations at Wellington. I'm a member of the firm's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and I have the pleasure of also serving as an advisor on the Wellington Women's Business Alliance Advocacy and Advancement Subcommittee. On behalf of WBA, we warmly welcome you all to our Kickoff International Day event. This is the first of a series of events to celebrate women's achievements, raise awareness against bias, and take action for equality. So, before we get started, I just want to inform you that this session is going to be recorded. We will be taking questions at the end of the panel. So if you do have a question, you can also use Teams chat internally, and Priyal Goyal is going to be our contact, so feel free to send any questions through chat. And I also just want to remind everyone that this is a live discussion, so we are excited to be live, but we thank you for all of your patience should we encounter any technical difficulties. So let's get started. I am honored to be joined by an esteemed panel of trailblazing change agents. We're going to hear firsthand about the challenges, strategies, and lessons learned that have brought them to this moment. I would like to begin by welcoming the panel. We have Angela Miller-May, who is Chief Investor Officer of Chicago's Teachers Pension Fund. Angela joined Chicago's Teachers Pension Fund in 2010, and prior to joining, she worked over 13 years in the banking industry. She holds an MBA in accounting from Kellstad Graduate School of Business at DePaul University, and she also has a bachelor's in economics from Northwestern University. Angela has been recognized for her DEI efforts, and we don't have time to list them all, but I do want to just include one of the most recent honors from the Women Investment Professionals 2020 Trailblazer Award, Distinguished Women Investment Professional of the Year. I am honored to have Angela with me here today. Thank you for being part of this panel.
Thank you.
Also on the panel, we're honored to have Jane Stiles, former CIO at MS Amlin and currently a co-lead of the Diversity Project Ambassador Program. Until 2019, she was CEO and CIO of MS Amlin's investment business and a member of their group's ExCo, as well as non-executive director for the FTSE 100 investment management services company Hargreaves Lansdown Place. Prior to joining Amlin, Jane worked as an independent management consulting advising blue chip companies. I'm not going to tell you too much of her history as well, should I spoil any of the upcoming information, but I also want to highlight that she is an executive MBA from Cranfield School of Management, an associate of Chartered Financial Analyst Society of the UK, a fellow of Chartered Institute of Bankers, and an associate of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, as well as a qualified executive coach. We are so excited to have you join us, so welcome today, Jane.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Next, we have Janet Perumal, who is Senior Managing Director, Partner, Director of Investments Asia, and Head of Hong Kong for Wellington. Janet's a member of the firm's senior leadership team and brings over 23 years of industry experience, of which she's been with Wellington for the last 9 years. She started at the firm as a portfolio specialist and has held various roles since across 4 global Wellington offices. As head of the Hong Kong office, she's responsible for management and regulatory oversight of the business activities. And as Director of Investments Asia, she manages, recruits, and mentors the group's investors in Hong Kong and Tokyo. She's also a member of the Capital Commitments Committee, Compensation Committee, and the Global Governance Committee. She's received her Bachelor's of Commerce from the University of New South Wales, Australia, and she holds a CFA designation and is a member of the Institute. So Janet, we'd like to welcome you here today.
Thanks so much, Clarissa. Great to be here.
Round out this amazing panel, we have Carolina San Martin, who is Managing Director and Director of ESG Research. Carolina leads our environmental, social, and corporate governance research team and oversees the firm's ESG research and stewardship activities, including our company engagement and voting efforts. In this capacity, she ensures the firm's ESG capabilities meet the evolving needs of our clients globally. Carolina has held various positions before coming to Wellington, and she began her work in the international development field in Russia, holding positions at Project Harmony, Eurasia Fund, and the International Finance Corporation. Thank you, Carolina, for joining. She also is our secretary of the firm's Investment Stewardship Committee, and she additionally has a CFA designation as well. So thank you, Carolina, for joining us today, and thank you all for being here.
Of course, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
So, as you can tell from their bios, these fearless women have had amazing journeys that have led them here today. And I just want to start by pointing out how absolutely awesome it is to have 4 panelists across 4 different time zones, making this a true international event. So, without further ado, International Women's Day. You know, the theme is Choose to Challenge. And so I'd really like to kick off our discussion and reflecting on each of your personal and professional journeys. So I'd love to hear about when you realized that you had what I like to call a unique superpower to impact change. And I think, Janet, would you mind kicking us off with this discussion today?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Clarissa. So firstly, I just want to say happy International Women's Day. I feel really privileged to speak to you all today, and I'm honored to be a participant on this panel with wonderful fellow panelists, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about their stories as well. So to the question of unique superpower, I'm not sure I have one. As I reflected on the question, I think I have a lot of strengths that I know are shared by many at this event. Some strengths which have helped me in my journey, I think, are a sense of belief, grit in trying different things or taking risk, and perseverance to pivot or modify as things come up my way. A lot of these strengths, I think, were imbued in me at a very early age. As a child of immigrants, my parents are from Sri Lanka and are Tamil, which is a minority ethnic race. And in terms of wanting to provide us with a better education and future opportunities, they emigrated to Kenya in the mid-1970s, where I was born. And when I was 8 years old, they immigrated again to Australia for the same reason. So I had 2 big cultural shifts, which, was a really big teaching moment for me in terms of watching my parents navigate sort of difficult environments and sort of being a minority in sort of different ways as well. And so it was, I think that experience of watching them navigate has been really helpful for me, as I've been a minority or the first in a few different settings. So one of the examples there would be, one of the few brown girls in a selective girls' school in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. The first South Asian female in a government-linked private equity team in Dubai. And I think I'm the first head of office in the APAC region who was hired locally in a sort of a portfolio specialist or more junior product management role. And so, I think from a career perspective, these strengths have come through in backing myself or in taking chances with different roles in different countries, even as some have advised against it. I remember moving to Dubai with my husband and my then 1-year-old daughter back in 2006, and wanted to get back into work after taking some maternity leave in the asset management industry. And so I contacted the head of the CFA Society in Dubai and sort of trying to understand the scope for finding jobs and what that might look like. He promptly told me that it'll be very difficult for me to find a job in Dubai because I'm a woman of South Asian descent. He's basically said the 2 traits of being female and being a person of color would screen me out on the first round of any suitable roles in the industry. That wasn't easy to hear. And so what happened is I doubled down on looking for a suitable job while expanding the scope of what I was looking for. Happily, 3 months later, I'd secured a role in a sought-after private equity fund focused on real estate. I was lucky that the hiring manager was a woman who saw past my color and gender and hired me on potential. And I'm thankful that I had those values of sort of believing myself, backing myself in looking for these jobs and persevering. And then just finally, in terms of impacting change, I think about this on two levels. For me, on the personal front, it's teaching my children values that have come through my parents, but also building upon them and showing them progress. But importantly, preparing them to continue to accelerate that progress because we still have a long way to go. They have the chance of seeing their grandmother, who's my mom, who's wonderful stay-at-home mom, but she did have aspirations to have a career, but could not achieve those for many reasons, including translation of educational qualifications, language, looking after young children. And then they've seen me progress through hard work and also having opportunities that I've been able to capitalize upon. And I'm hoping that they develop their own strengths over time and continue to push across any dimensions that they wish to challenge. And then finally, on the professional front, in terms of impact and change, I do have a unique platform in my role to really impact change. And I very much hope to utilize this platform to progress equality of opportunity along gender, ethnic, educational lines and dimensions. And importantly, in bringing everyone along and making sure everyone's creating sort of an inclusive environment for colleagues to thrive in. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet, for sharing that truly interesting story across countries, across globes. So thank you for that. Angela, I'd love to hear a little bit about your aha moment that's led you here today. And if there's any synergies with Janet's story, please share.
Sure. Happy International Women's Day to everyone. And thank you for having me. When I reflect on my journey, both professionally and personally, I think that my unique powers are really my work ethic, my determination, and my resilience. Because these are the things that, have really been consistent throughout my journey. I've always worked hard. I've always had a spirit of resilience, and it doesn't allow me to quit, when things get tough. I've always felt that my success it meant more than just an immediate accomplishment for me. It meant an accomplishment of a vision for my family and an example to other women, especially minority women, and an example of possibilities or what could be. I don't think that it was a defining moment that led me to where I am today. I think that it was the sum of many defining moments. But the first moment that I realized that I could be a change agent was really, when I started to see results, when things began to change or when I had proof that, hard work paid off. So, because I came to this position kind of accidentally or by fate, I've always thought that, it was for a reason that I landed at Chicago Teachers Pension Fund. And as I look back and really think about things, the things that I thought I was controlling, I wonder, whether I was in control or whether I was just really taking advantage of opportunities that came my way. So, I worked my way from an entry-level role at Chicago Teachers to Chief Investment Officer of a $12 billion fund. And while I was always qualified and I had the skill sets to be a leader, I never really imagined or envisioned it. I just put my head down and I worked hard. And I wonder, why me? There are countless women that work hard, that are ambitious, smart and driven. And I don't have to tell you all that. But I wondered why I was given the opportunity. And so the only answer that I've been able to come to was that I was given the opportunity to really make a difference and to really forge a path for others. And I feel like that's my superpower. It's the purpose that I found or that really found me. And I only came to this understanding of what gave me purpose, and I think that was the major defining moment of realization for me. But I come from a hardworking family and a family of entrepreneurs. My mother, uncles, and my aunts were actually teenagers during the civil rights movement, and they were raised with a sense of pride and strength and determination and resilience. And my grandmother was a freedom rider, and she made multiple trips throughout the South fighting segregation. And I think what's also important is that freedom rides were inclusive of women where prior civil rights actions weren't. So I feel like, how could I, use my platform that their hard work led me to have for the benefit of my family, my community, and other women and minorities. So I was taught to never really let an opportunity go to waste, because you never know when another opportunity is going to come around. And this has been a lesson for me that I've always cherished, and that continues to push me. Ultimately, I feel that I am using my superpower for good. When I can play a part in advancing women and minorities, whether it's by providing access to capital for women and minorities or our own firms, or by pushing for the recruitment, the hiring, and the promotion of women, I feel as though the work that I do today and the work that I use my superpower for in providing these opportunities and advancing others really pays homage to the women in my life, and really compounds their efforts for generations to come. And I think those are my defining moments, and those are my strengths and my superpower.
So much for sharing, Angela. I love the sum of your defining moments. I think that's a great way to position the question. So I'm probably going to position it in that way to Jane too. I'd love to hear, a little bit about your complete journey and how you've discovered your superpowers as well.
I struggle with the term superpowers, but that's just me. But and I would agree. I don't think that there was one defining moment for me. I've always been very curious, and I'm always wanting to learn and to make things better. I've been told throughout my career that I ask different questions. So maybe I bring a different perspective. So I don't know what the cause or effect, what came first on that. But also I have always been comfortable with being different. When I was younger, so between the ages of 6 and 10, we moved to Northern Ireland. So still within the UK, but we were living in Northern Ireland. At the age of 10, my father was killed in an accident, which meant that we moved the next day straight back to Yorkshire. So I was the eldest of 3 and helped my mum bring up my younger brothers. Also, I had at the time a very strong Irish accent, which is there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all, apart from if you're then in Yorkshire, you speak differently, and it's seen as you're different, and therefore I suppose then I became comfortable with that being different. My mum was a science teacher, and she was a real role model. She always worked. I always remember her working, and when we were very young, she actually set up a play school so that she could work and be with us at the same time. So, and she would always say to me, or to all of us, so I had 2 younger brothers, and I said, so never say you can't, always say you can, and then you will. And I think that inspired in me, instilled in me this can-do attitude, that you're always looking, and if you get barriers, if you come across obstacles, there's usually ways around those. So I think she was very instrumental in that. And also another example of me being comfortable with being different is that although, as I said, my mum was a science teacher,
I took the decision not to go to university. I decided that I wanted to start working and learn about work, but also it was very important for me to study as well. So I went to work for a company that would support my studies, but where I was actually working. So I suppose I was creating what we're talking about here now in the UK about degree apprenticeships. Yeah, I think that's examples of why I think I've been able to be a change catalyst is I keep asking questions and I'm determined.
Thank you, Jane. I'm gonna challenge you and say that is a very unique superpower, and I celebrate that in terms of your resilience and your curiosity. So thank you so much for sharing. Carolina, I would love to hear your story as well. You know, are there similarities in what you're hearing, and tell us about your power as well.
Great. Well, happy International Women's Day. I hope the sun shining on our celebration is not too distracting for you all. So a lot of what has been said resonates with me, and I think it's hard to pick one defining moment. But if I think back to an early one, I think it was probably my first day in kindergarten. It's 1979. It's Smyrna. I'm in Smyrna, Georgia, and I'm just 5 years old. And I just immigrated to the U.S. with my mother from South America just a few weeks earlier. And it's at least 15 years before there's any real immigration into the South. So there's no Latinx community to speak of. I don't speak English. People around me don't speak Spanish. And while I had been a pretty social, outgoing preschooler before coming to the U.S., on that day, I feel a new shyness come over me. And I was completely afraid to speak up. But despite this new uncomfortable feeling, there was one thing that was even worse. From the first attendance call that morning throughout the day, I kept hearing this word, Carolina. And I realized that nobody knew how to properly pronounce my name. So even though I don't speak English yet, I understand everything going on, I do understand that Carolina is not my name. And that was enough to get me over my fear of speaking up on that day. So that evening when I get home, my mom asked me how my first day at school went, and the proud smile on my face, I say, I got everyone to say my name right today, Carolina. So that day, as I think back to how I felt, I think I realized that I was different. That was one of my earliest memories of feeling that, and I felt like an outsider, and all the nerves and shyness that came with that were part of that experience. But I also somehow figured out, despite not speaking the language, how to get them to say my name properly. So I think what really stayed with me from that experience was that I learned to hold on to my culture, to take pride in who I was and where I came from, all while still figuring out my new world, how it worked, how to speak the language, and how to succeed in my new school. And over the years, I've really come to understand what a gift it is to have that different perspective. But I've also learned to realize that to really harness the power of that gift, having the perspective alone isn't enough. And you have to use your voice to share it. So fast forward to adulthood, as I embarked on my career, I think I probably carried around that shy 5-year-old called Carolina a little bit too long. Being different is something that I always felt proud of. But I looking back, there were several places in my career where my awareness of being other, being different, probably led me to hold back. I was a participant on the edge of things. I felt I was outside looking in. Even when I had ideas in meetings, I didn't raise my hand or speak up. And I think what it really came down to is I was feeling that speaking up would be risky. I was afraid of taking that risk. I thought maybe I didn't have enough context in the situation. Maybe I didn't know enough about the subject to really be right in what I was saying. But over time, I had to relearn that day from that first day of kindergarten, the lesson from that day, and realize that the real risk was in not speaking up. And I could see my colleagues who were more vocal than I, more confident in sharing their ideas, were getting opportunities. And it's no surprise when you do that, people get to know you, people learn to trust you. So really reframing the risk to see the downside of not speaking up changed how I showed up to work and participated. So the aha moment came over time for me. To affect change, each of us has a unique perspective to contribute, but it's up to us to speak up and to put it to good use.
Serena, appreciate that. And it sounds like, you know, each of you have had a series of moments that have brought you to the superpower, and I'd love to just dig a little bit deeper into that. And I know some of it had occurred as childhood or leading through to this moment here, but can we talk specifically in terms of navigating your careers? You know, in which ways have those defining moments and these superpowers really come to the surface to allow you to say that you are in a different situation or are embarking on something new that you hadn't done before? Can you share any thoughts and stories to that? And Jane, it comes to mind for.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
So it's interesting when you get asked to participate in sessions like this, which are great. And again, thank you for asking me. You start to go look back and sort of think about what you've done. And for me, I seem to be somebody who sets things up from scratch. So when I started as a trainee equity fund manager, it was at a time when we didn't have an established European portfolio. Basically, most of the investments were UK. So they said, she's a trainee, she can't do much harm if we give her a little bit of money to set up a European portfolio, which I did. That plus then I also latterly took over Asia ex-Japan and Japan. They were already established, but I took them over and changed dramatically what we were doing there. So went from having the little bit that couldn't harm anything to having the most money of the money under management. But that also brought different perspectives of I would be asking different questions than the other people that might be in the room about their particular geographic portfolios. I was working for the Halifax at the time, which was a massive mutual at the time savings and loan institution, which had I don't know, about 25,000 people. So I was then promoted to be the youngest person in a management position in the whole business, and also I was the most senior woman as well. So I suppose that sort of being at the front foot and being trying to be a role model and showing that this could be done. I remember there was a very big discussion as to whether I should be given a car or not because I was too young, but there we are. I got one. And I was the only female fund manager as well for quite some time. Then we fast forward to when I was, I actually took a career break from after Halifax. We were based up in Yorkshire. They wanted to bring the asset managers down to London, so I took voluntary redundancy. I chose to do that, and Halifax was funding me for my executive MBA, so it's a 2-year MBA, and I left halfway through, and they paid for the rest of it for me. So I spent some time doing some management consultancy while I was also doing my MBA. Then I went to Amlin as a consultant to start with, but they had never employed a chief investment officer before. I inherited 1.5 people, and then started to build that up into a investment business. And we did things differently, and was always told that we're doing things differently than our competitors. And I remember when I arrived there, it's a Lloyd's company. So there's the Corporation of Lloyd's investment rules, which were, to somebody who's a market person, were just, I just kept saying, I remember kept saying, this is not how markets work. This is not, because although I was a fund manager, a professional fund manager, qualified, at the time I actually couldn't put on any trades. I had to employ another fund manager from an extant, like a Wellington type company, to do the trades. So I just kept saying that this is wrong, and I started a campaign, set up a committee for across, you know, with competitors, and pushed and got the rules changed, which actually required an act of parliament, which I think it was one line in a bigger act of parliament. But anyway, I was quite proud about that. So yeah, it's been about start building things from scratch for me, and then I decided now to take another career break. I built up a brilliant team. We had a good track record, and felt it was time to pass the baton on to them. And for me to step back and look for a new challenge. And also then in terms of ambiguity, I think if you're an asset manager, you just have to be comfortable with ambiguity, because there is just no way that you can predict what's going to happen. You can have views and you need to risk manage that, but it is ambiguous.
Thank you, Jane. That does sound like that is interesting position to be in, you know, building from scratch, trying to challenge rules that are set before your arrival. So thank you for that. I'd like to stay along those lines and thinking about this growth mindset and embracing intersectionality too. So Janet, hearing your story through your global assignments and really having similar change occur in your profession, can you talk about a little bit about you know, how you find your authenticity when you are put in positions of, you know, being a minority in the majority?
Not so quick with the mute button, but thanks. I mean, I think, you know, it's along the same lines of what we've heard in terms of Angela and Carolina and Jane talking about. It's a journey, and I would say, in terms of authenticity, you know, I feel like I do show up authentically, but it's a journey, and it's been a journey that I've sort of had my whole professional career over the last 23 years, and I'm still on that journey. I'm not quite there yet. You know, I think of it as in 3 phases. I think the first part of the journey, or the whole journey, really is about building up skills and confidence, which has enabled me to show up more authentically now and be comfortable in my skin. So, you know, if you think about it in phases, the first phase was, you know, as I said, as a child, I grew up in a few different countries, and that taught me to learn and observe early on, and listen intently as well, because I did not want to stand out. You know, I wasn't as comfortable being different or standing out too early. But importantly, it also showed me new skills of, you know, curiosity for people, how they do things, how they think about things. And so that was really important and foundational. And then if I think about sort of the second phase in my early 20s, I had the opportunity to participate in a global associate program for JP Morgan. And that made me move from Sydney to New York. You know, it was the first time I sort of left the home as such. And from there followed international stints. But I think what happened is, you know, during that time, those experiences really helped me get out of my comfort zone and sort of challenged me. And importantly, it also showed me what it's like to shift from being a minority, which I felt like I'd been in that sort of foundational phase, to a majority, which I think is a really powerful lesson. So for example, in Australia and in the US, I can be a minority as I've entered teams that were, you know, that were predominantly white male. Yet in Asia, I sometimes feel like I'm a majority, depending on the dimensions that you could use. And so what that's taught me is that it's really important to see things from both sides, the importance of being inclusive, the importance of sourcing a broader perspective and listening intently, and then finally putting yourself in others' shoes, right? To sort of feel to sort of get a sense of what that might feel like as a minority. And then in the third phase, I guess, of this journey, which is what I'm currently sort of in and sort of coming to the end of, I hope, is sort of finding my voice, which has been a common area of developmental feedback I've received throughout the years, and something that I'm still working on. Initially, that feedback very early on showed up as, someone sort of asking me to be more visible, which I didn't find as helpful. And just as an aside, I was listening to the intersectionality panel at Black History Month last month, which with some fantastic programming that was done by colleagues at the firm. And one of the areas of feedback that really resonated with me was this notion of, growing up in sort of colonial cultures, which is very much how I've grown up, and also with traditional parents, is that you need to have this ability to ask for permission to speak. And, as I thought about that, I realized that was probably something that held me back a little bit more over time in terms of speaking up. But what's happened in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years is I've been really lucky to have fantastic managers and mentors who've really dispelled that notion of needing to have permission to speak or, show up. And they've really encouraged me to share my insights and perspective, because it's actually additive to the conversation, and it brings discussion and debate on important topics. So I think that's just been my journey of being more authentic and being more comfortable in myself. And, I'm hoping that in sort of, as I said, with this sort of in the role that I'm in right now and working with sort of mentees and the teams that I'm working with, that's something that I can sort of bring to the table for them, and showing them that it's okay to, that they should be lowering the bar because their perspectives are really valued, and we want to hear them.
Interested to hear the stages of evolution of finding that voice. And I would love to hear, Angela, from your perspective. It sounds like Janet had some managers that have been helpful, mentors along the way. Can you share a little bit about some of your experiences and maybe dig a little deeper into a shiro or two that you fondly refer to?
Yeah, I just, everything, I relate to everything that's been said, Jane saying, being comfortable with being different. I'm comfortable with really being the only one because I'm an only child. And Janet talking about, finding your voice, I'm still on that journey too. But, when I think about how I got here, I think about my shiro, my grandmother, who, valued education, but, was not allowed to finish anything but the 6th grade. And then I think about my mom and my siblings who had to really migrate to Chicago to finish high school because of racism. And, I can only imagine, how proud they were of me, being the first generation college graduate. But, my career has not really been a straight line. I started in banking back in 1996. I'm dating myself. And I advanced in banking. I was happy. I was comfortable. I took on more responsibilities. And then we entered 2008, and I began to have to lay off people I had worked with for such a long time. And, soon after it became my turn to, really be displaced. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't, for the first time, know what I was going to do next. But I think, restarting or, being forced to restart my career at that moment was really a blessing. And at that point, I had my master's and I had a BA in economics, and I was just like lost a little bit. So I decided to go back to school and take some investment and finance courses. And later that year in 2010, I landed at Chicago Teachers Pension Fund in an entry-level role. But I was so excited because now I was going to get the exposure that I wanted. I just celebrated that foot in the door. So, the team was really small. And so that afforded me to really learn every aspect of, investing with a public pension plan. And, whatever anybody didn't want to do, it landed on my desk. And I was like, I wasn't that person that said, that's not my job or I can't do that. I was like, I'm going to learn this. And this was before we had Google. So I really had to do some research and learn it. And, I know that, I didn't come to this role in a conventional path, but I was blessed with opportunities and I worked hard. And there were many lessons along the way. So one important lesson was that, again, I say you never know when opportunities will present themselves. And the worst feeling is to not be ready for those opportunities or to be ready and afraid to pursue them. I think I still have a little shyness about myself, and that kind of resonates with me as well. But I've made those mistakes of letting things pass me by, and I learned from them. So, I said I'm never going to do that again. That's not a mistake that I'm going to make again. And so after that, I took advantage of every opportunity that came my way. And at the time that the director of investments role was on the table, I remember sitting at an event similar to this event and listening to a woman give a keynote speech on the topic of not being able to raise your hand and ask for what you deserve. And her words were so powerful for me. I believe that, she was speaking directly to me. So I went home, brushed off my resume, and I marched into the interim executive director's office the next day, and I had a conversation about the role, my qualifications, and what I would do as director of investments. And I braced myself for disappointment, and I was surprised because he said, I'm happy that you came to talk to me. I didn't think you wanted it. And that was like the next lesson for me. Don't believe that people really can read your mind or know, your dreams and your thoughts. And he really reinforced for me, the message of, don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask for what you want. And just like that, I feel like I found my voice, or I felt like I figured out how to use my voice. And I also understood how powerful a message could be, and I wanted to pay it forward and try to inspire other women to take that next step. And so as the journey goes on, the executive director was hired, and I was promoted to the director of investments and then the chief investment officer. But along the way, I felt like everything that I learned was a learning experience, and everything that I learned helped me prepare for this role. I think, getting let go from Northern Trust, it helped me to really have humility and be resilient. And, the leadership skills that I learned from being there were, excellent in helping me to manage the team that I have now. And I think searching for the new role taught me to be patient because I wasn't. And I think it was all meant to be. And the lessons that I learned along the way helped to prepare me and help me to stretch and grow. And if I hadn't gone through those challenges, I don't think that I would be the person that I am today. So I think, in retrospect, all things kind of work for success. And I encourage all of you all to embrace change because it's in that change and those challenges that you really understand and you really grow and you really have those new experiences that kind of propel you forward. So that's kind of been my journey and how I try to turn things around along the way.
And those risks and taking on things that others hadn't really wanted to raise their hand and preparing you for this moment. I love hearing those stories. I want to just take that and shift gears and talking about impacting change from either an industry perspective or an organization perspective. I'd love to hear any thoughts on tools or strategies that you can share. And maybe I'll turn this over to Carolina and even Jane. I'd love to hear from a diversity project perspective as well. But Caroline, can you talk a little bit about some of the DEI tools needed to really help impact change?
Sure. Well, I think one of the lessons of the pandemic has been to really remind us how important human capital is to our economy, and that has spurred an acceleration in tools specifically around DEI. And I wanted to share some of what we're doing around Wellington's investment stewardship efforts on this topic. We started with a more proactive approach, stewardship approach on diversity back in 2017, when we wrote letters to U.S. companies without a single woman on their board. We followed up to engage with them and encourage improvement. And the majority of those companies have since added a woman or more than one to their boards. For those that did not catch up, we started using our vote last year to really hold them accountable for continued improvement. This year, we're broadening those efforts to include racial diversity and a focus on workforce diversity as well, not just diversity in the boardroom. So what we're, the stewardship plan is to encourage U.S. portfolio companies to publicly disclose their workforce demographic data, or EEO1 data, and to improve transparency around the racial composition of their board. And we're going to use our vote to hold companies accountable for improved disclosures this year. And then next year, we'll use our vote to encourage improved representation once we have the data to assess which companies are lagging. And many of our investor peers are implementing similar strategies. So companies are more focused than ever on driving real change. So that's from the stewardship perspective. And then as a firm, we're also raising the bar for ourselves and re-examining our diversity practices, raising our commitments. And as one example of this, we recently joined the Corporate Call to Action. It's a new coalition of financial services firms that shares the goal of advancing racial and economic security and opportunities both within and outside of our organizations. And as part of this commitment, we've agreed to publicly disclose our own EEO1 data, which will happen later this year. We've also launched several new initiatives designed to help us increase and develop our underrepresented talent at all levels. I'll mention a couple of them. Our Groundbreaker Academy is a 9-month professional development and skill building program for early to mid-career employees. And another is our HBCU Scholarship and Engagement Program. And finally, we're also, I'll mention one more, Becoming Allies. It's another initiative that is where leaders across the firm have come together to really learn how to be better allies for our underrepresented talent. So there's a lot of work still ahead to drive real change, but with the acceleration of efforts that we're seeing both within Wellington and beyond, I think that gives us a better chance to meet our goals.
Mute. So, and it's great to see that Wellington is a member of the Diversity Project, which is where I've been doing some volunteer work while I'm not working full time. And I think, reflecting on what Carolina said is, the COVID and also the horrific killing of George Floyd last year has really shone a light on the S of ESG. Which didn't really get as much focus as it could have done. And it's great to see the actions Wellington's taking, because as an industry, the savings or investment and savings industry is really pretty poor. Certainly in terms of fund managers, I think it's the last numbers I saw is about 9% of actual risk takers are female in the UK. So if asset managers are legitimately going to have the conversations that Caroline is talking about with their investee companies, we need as an industry to get our own act together. So last year in the first UK lockdown, I was asked to write something about the questions that leaders were asking of themselves and each other because of COVID. And it's called Build Back Better, And if anybody's interested, I'm happy to send the link across so people can have a read of it. And it looks at everything from a diversity angle. But really the message was, now is the time to grasp the change momentum that has come from COVID. COVID is terrible, but there's always good things that can come out of bad. And the change momentum would be towards an inclusive culture, which means a culture of belonging. I mean, the pandemic has reinforced the need for all companies to be agile and innovative. And it's diverse teams with inclusive managers who tend to make the best decisions, are more innovative and resilient, and also compliant. Heard a lot earlier about speak up culture, and speak up culture is certainly something that the UK regulator is very, very focused on. So it just makes sense for so many different reasons. It is a strategic imperative. It's not something that's just nice to have. There is a danger that with COVID that we've heard a lot about the challenges with that's fallen on women, particularly with homeschooling, and we need to make sure that we're supporting women in our organisations. We can't go back to how we were. This has gone on too long, and we've formed new habits and new ways of working. I agree with what was said earlier about businesses and leaders have become more humanised. There's a lot more discussion about mental health as well. And people, when they say to somebody, how are you feeling? Do they really want to know? And there's a lot more active listening going on, which has to be a good thing. The changes to remote working happened within days, but otherwise would have taken years to achieve. So we need to make sure now that companies grasp the benefit of that, but also start to look at true flexibility, because working remotely is not working flexibly. So we need to think about hours, and there needs to be some difficult conversations within teams about, when do we have to come together? When can we work separately? And so we can try and make everything work for most people. So what I've been doing with a diversity project in the theme of change is looking at the levers that maybe hadn't been used as much as they could have been. So one is boards. So I've got a conversation with the UK regulator to see if we can have a session on one of their non-exec director sessions that they run about to show the questions they need to be asking of themselves, but also of the companies that they are directors of. The data, we need the data and the numbers, so we know where we are, and then we can see where progress is being made. Sorry, my jumper is completely shedding, so it's brand new. But and also I've set up a group of headhunters as well, search companies, because they are highly influential. So we're working on setting up an inclusive recruitment toolkit to help companies within our industry not fall against the hurdles that can come up when looking for diverse talent, and also then to challenge the social norms. I think it's every one of us can. I mean, the theme for International Women's Day is challenge, and I think it is beholden on all of us to be listening to asking our colleagues questions, really listening to the answers. If we see that inappropriate behaviours are happening, it's just to call those out, because if we can make it a social norm, then we will have fully inclusive cultures.
Thank you, Jane. I think that's an important point, and I think it's a great way to segue to our final minutes, because our time is coming to an end. But I think along those lines, the call to action, I would love to hear in a minute or two, what would you say to the next generation of women or would you like to speak to organizations, managers? I'll give you free rein to the audience you wanted to speak to, but can you leave us with words of wisdom on how we can choose to challenge and blaze our own trails?
So do you want me to start? Yeah, is that?
Thanks, off, Jane.
Yeah. Okay. So my message is for for all of us, I think, really, but it's to follow your passion, but don't be a perfectionist. To be compassionate, curious, conscientious, and creative, and to challenge.
I'm going to say choose to challenge. We've heard about speaking up, so choose to challenge, offering a perspective. Don't come away from a meeting without offering what you wanted to say and regretting that, that you didn't get a chance to say that. In terms of choosing to take a risk, I think Angela spoke about this, but opportunities, I've had a lot of conversations with female friends and colleagues where opportunities are presented and they're never sure if it's the right time or if they're actually ready for this opportunity. Dive in and think about that and take that risk. And then finally, the last thing I would say is one of my favorite authors is a Nigerian author by the name of Chimamanda Adichie, and it's her sort of choose to challenge the narrative of a single story. And this is in terms of being inclusive. We're not two-dimensional, and we shouldn't be slotted into boxes of gender or race or education or the demographics that we come from. So have conversations, connect with people. There's so many rich stories that we all can, thrive in. And I think, that's going to just make us have a much more inclusive environment. And I encourage people to do that.
I want to say, first of all, I'm so proud of being an investor with Wellington. And Wellington has become the example that I use for other asset managers in trying to develop diversity and inclusive measures and initiatives. The wisdom or the advice that I would leave is change is not comfortable. Learn to live in the discomfort and don't let fear paralyze you, but really let that fear be a catalyst for you that really propels you into more confidence, more strength, into your purpose. I would say choose to do everything in your power to affect change, because if you don't, things are going to stay the same. And finally, choose to challenge yourself and choose to challenge others to be their best selves.
That's great. I think mine kind of picks up on a lot of what's been said, but I'd come back to that first day of kindergarten back in Smyrna, and just share that each of you has a unique perspective to share with others, and just encourage you to embrace it, to really embrace who you are and where you came from, and know that everyone around you will benefit when you share your knowledge and experience. So if speaking up feels scary, tap into that fear as a catalyst that Angela just mentioned, and think about the risk of not speaking up and go for it.
You all. So I can't believe the time is coming to an end. So I just want to stop and first off say thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, for your experiences that have showed courage, curiosity, resilience, and I think the overarching thing of choosing to challenge and really speaking up to impact change. I thank you for all you have done and continue to do. Thank you for spending your time with us as well. We really appreciate it. And it's been a fantastic way to kick off International Women's Day and the month long of Women's History celebrations to follow. So sincerely, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you.